Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Afternoon, everyone. So in this section, we are going to present data collection technique in qualitative research. I am Ella Putri Nimasari with my team Budian Lutfiati and Ibu Ririn Fatmawati will explain about the data collection in details and also its implementation in journal article. So first of all, before we are going to explain about the detailed example of data collection technique, let's take a look at the nature of data in qualitative research. So data here are direct quotations from people about their experiences, opinions, feelings, and knowledge. It is about asking, watching, and reviewing. The data here are determined by the researcher's theoretical orientation, the problem and purpose of the study, and also the sample selected. So basically, there are two quality that influence for our research. The first one is the quality of our research instrument, and also the second one is the quality of how we collect the data. In data collection for qualitative research, there are 4 techniques. The first one is interview, which is conversation with a purpose, and the second one is observation, where it is a method of monitoring and listening to an encounter or phenomena as it occurs that is purposeful, systematic, and selective. Here also there is a document analysis where those documents are materials such as photographs, videos, films, memos, letters, diaries, clinical case records, and also memorabilia of all sorts. And the last one is triangulation. And in this qualitative research, it is the utilization of various methods or data sources to achieve a thorough understanding of events. Well, let's talk about the interview. So we conduct interview when the researchers cannot observe feelings, thoughts, and attention. And the research needs interview when it cannot observe how people have organized the world and the meanings they attach to what goes in the world. So in interview, it aims to collect data from a large number of people representing a broad range of ideas. Okay, in interview itself, there are 3 types. The first one is structured interview, the second one is semi-structured interview, and the last one is unstructured interview. Let's have discussion about each of it in details. So in interview structure continuum, there are 3 kinds of structured interview. The first one is highly structured or standardized interview. Well, in this kind of interview, wording of questions is predetermined because the research needs a particular or specific result in homogenic data. Therefore, the order of questions is predetermined before conducting the interview. And this kind of interview is oral form of a written survey. However, this kind of interview is commonly used in quantitative research. In qualitative studies, it is usually used to obtain demographic data such as age, gender, ethnicity, education, and so on. And for the example of standardized interview is commonly used in survey, in governmental survey and marketing survey. And for the semi-structured interview, different from the standardized one, the interview guide includes a mix of more and less structured interview questions. While in highly structured, we use close-ended questions. In semi-structured one, we use less and more open-ended questions. And all the questions here use flexibly. It is usually specific data required from all respondents. In semi-structured interview, the largest part of interview guided by a list of questions or issues to be explored. Therefore, the follow-up questions from the interviewer from the previous questions written in the interview is really important to explore more perspectives from the interviewee. And here, there is no predetermined wording or order. And for the last type of interview structure is unstructured or informal. Here in informal interview 1, open-ended questions are highlighted. It is very flexible and exploratory. And because it is more like a conversation, the relationship between interviewer and interviewee is really important. Therefore, the bonding from the interviewer, not the bonding, but how the skills from the interviewer, how he or she asks the questions to the participants really influence how the participants deliver the answer. Also, in unstructured one, used when the researcher does not know enough about the phenomenon to ask relevant questions, and it aims to formulate questions for the later interviews. Such what I have mentioned before, that follow-up questions, or it is called probing, really important in unstructured interview. And this kind of interview is used primarily in ethnography, participant observation, and case study. However, I would like to underline that although the informal or unstructured or in semi-structured is more flexible than the standardized one, the control from the researcher to the theoretical framework is really important, because the insights and understanding can be obtained in this approach, but at the same time, an interviewer may feel lost. So the researcher should focus on the theoretical framework. Therefore, the data analysis cannot be disturbed just because of the flexibility or exploratory from the interview in unstructured format. Okay, I will show you the semi-structured interview and also the unstructured interview. But for the structured one, I will show you in the journal. So as we can see in a semi-structured interview, the questions are more open, like tell me about experience, how do you think, what is your feeling, and all is about describing the situation, the certain condition, experiences, and how someone deal with a particular condition. So in unstructured interview, the flexibility of the question are more open rather than the semi-structured one. So let's take a look at advantages and disadvantages of interview. So for the advantages or the plus one from the interview is it is more appropriate for a complex situation, and it is useful for collecting in-depth information, and information can be supplemented. And as we use probing in semi-structured and unstructured one, the questions can be explained when the interviewee still do not understand with the questions, so the researcher can explain more about the questions. And the last one is that the interview has a wider application in research. However, in opposite, there are also disadvantages or weaknesses for the interview. It is very time consuming and also expensive, because it is not easy to create a good questions or to build the appropriate skills to to gain the information or in specific knowledge from the participants. And because in semi-structured and unstructured interview is more open, the research may introduce bias. Yeah. Therefore, as I explained before, that the theoretical framework for the very first time is really significant for the the implementation of the interview. And the quality of data depends on quality of interaction and skill of interviewer. So because in interview, the key for this data collection technique is based on the questions. The better the question, the better results we can have. And to have a better questions, it needs a better skills to develop or create questions, and also a better skills to develop psychological understanding between the interviewer and also the interviewee. Because if the interviewer cannot understand the condition from the interviewee, it may influence much on the results of the answer from the participants. And if the answer is not appropriate with the question, it also affects to our research results. So because there are several requirements for the interview, here I explain the guidelines for interviewing. So first of all, as the interviewer, we have to listen more and talk less, and do not interrupt what the participants try to respond to the questions. And we have to tolerate silence, because silence here doesn't mean that the participant cannot answer the question. He or she may try to recall the information to respond the questions. And it is important to avoid leading questions, because when we try to lead the questions, the answer from the participants may influence their thoughts or their intentions. So ask open-ended questions here is really important. And keep participants focused and ask for concentrate details, and follow up or probes or what participants say. Therefore, we can have deeper or in-depth information, particularly for semi-structured and unstructured format interview. And please do not be judgmental about participants' views or beliefs, because everyone has different point of view, and there is no correct or incorrect answers for one's perspective. So do not debate with the participants over their responses, because plus or minus results may have more or deep data for our qualitative studies. Okay, let's take a look. Yes, what I said before, that the good questions are the key for the interview. Yeah, these are types of questions and good questions. And after that, I will explain the questions to avoid. So first of all, types of questions. There are 6 suggestions to guide the good questions. The first is asking about the experience and behavior questions. And the second one is asking about opinion and values questions, feeling questions, knowledge questions, sensory question, and background or demographic questions. However, in asking this kind of question, we should have a specific strategy to avoid the sensitivity from the participants. Therefore, they still be able to answer our questions. So let me give you example like this. To avoid embarrassing or antagonizing respondents if they happen to be very sensitive about a particular issue, the wording may begin with some people would say. So we put the third object or the third person into our discussion. Therefore, the participants may feel do not feel as the second person that we ask directly. For example, like this, when we would like to ask what the what the hypothetical questions are like. Suppose it were my first day in training program, what would it be? Like? So, so therefore, the participants do not feel like we directly ask to them, but we put the third object or the third party to be involved in our discussion. Like some people would say that the employees who lost their job did something to bring about being fired. What would you tell them? Actually, in this question, we would like to ask their perspective if they lost their job, but to avoid their embarrassment related to the fire of the job, we began the wording of the question by some people would say something like this is the strategy to avoid the the sensitivity from the participants. Therefore, we still have good questions and we still have a good answer from the participants. And during the data collection, we need to do 3 important points. The first one, we have to take notes during interview and writing notes after the interview. Why is it so important? Because we may forget or may lose and about the events that may happen during the interview. So typing or making audio recording during interview and also the notes really important while we collecting the data in the interview. So here is the example of interview implemented in journal article. The first one, we have exploring language identities in English as a lingua franca communication in the context of Hong Kong University. So here, the researcher would like to focus on language identities in the perspective of Chinese bilingual students in Hong Kong University. So here they use semi-structured interview. Yeah. As we can see in data collection, they use multiple sources data, including semi-structured, written narratives, focus group discussion, and email correspondence. And basically, it is common to use integrated data collection technique in the qualitative studies, particularly in English language teaching. So the data collection does not stand alone in our research. And the second one is about reading aloud in ELT in China, an interview-based investigation. So here, the paper focus on the use of reading aloud. So it reports the result of a series of semi-structured interviews where they were invited to identify the reasons and problems in the use of reading aloud. Okay. Again, semi-structured interview is used to identify the teacher and also the student's perspective. Here, they were interviewed through face-to-face communication and also the form of telephone interview. Later on, I will show you how what kinds of interview conducted in several contexts. Now, this is the example of questions developed in semi-structured interview. As we can see that in semi-structured format, the researchers on the interview try to explore the participant perspective by using not only yes/no question, but also WH questions like, could you recall, when did, how often, when, why? Do you enjoy? What is your comment? Not only close-ended questions, but also the researchers try to develop open-ended questions. Okay, so in Journal of Trauma and Dissociation here, I will show you the example of the structure interview one. However, actually the structure interview is commonly used in what is it, in public survey, like in BPJS survey, in what is it, in social government survey, in each cities or in town. And here it is implemented in a research. However, it is rarely to see, or in my own knowledge, it is really rare. It is really rare to find out structure interview in ELT research. So here, for the, I think it is in psychological discipline area. So the researchers try to interview for finding self-destructive behaviors from the participants. So as you can see in the appendix, that all the questions are closed-ended questions format, like, have you ever had blah blah blah? Yes, no. If yes, how old? If yes, were you ever hospitalized like this? Yeah. So it is very strict and in a quantitative data. Well, and moreover, it is also the example of, again, semi-structured interview conducted in Indonesian context. The researchers try to find the curriculum innovation in ESP context. A semi-structured interview was employed to give more flexibility to research participants in responding questions and researcher to expand more information. Okay, having done with the interview, we would like to discuss observation, where in this kind of data collection technique, it will be delivered by Budian. Okay, the time is yours, Budian.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Ella. And now we will talk about observation. Observation is one of that can use to be found the investigate non-verbal behavior by using observation technique. Okay, next slide. Next slide, please, Mbak Ella. As you know, the observation has a specific characteristic when compared to other techniques. This is the type of observation based on the vital. There are three types of observation. The first is participant and then unstructured observation. Let's talk one by one. The first is about participant observation. Here, in this observation, the researcher is involved with the person who is being observed or is used source of the research data. While making observation, the researcher participates in doing what the data source do and shares the joy and sorrow. In these types, this participation observation, the data obtained will be more complete, sharp, and to know at which level of its behavior appears. And then for the overt observation and covert observation, it means that the researchers conducting the collecting data state frankly to the data source that he was conducting research. So those who are paying research know from the beginning to the end about the research activity. But at one time, the researcher also didn't openly or covertly in the observation. This is to obtain the data, so it's data still confidential. Okay, for the next unstructured observation, in this observation is an observation that is not prepared systematically about what will be observed. So in here, the researchers not prepare about the observation, and then this is then because researchers do not know exactly what will be observed. Also, the name is unstructured because the researcher don't know exactly what will be observed. And then in conducting observation, the researcher don't use standard instrument, but only in the form of observation sign. And then in participant observation, there are 4 kinds based on the Susan Steinbeck. The first is passive participant, moderate participant, active participant, and then complete participant. In passive participant, it is when the researcher comes to the place of the activity of the person being observed, but is not involved in the activity. And then for the moderate participant, there are balance between researcher being an insider and outsider. Researchers in collecting data participate in participatory observation in several activities, but not all of them. In active participation, the researcher follow is done by the resource person, but it's not completely complete. For the complete participant in data collection, the researcher fully involved in what the data source are doing. So it's natural. Researcher don't seem to be doing research. This data is highest involvement of researchers in the life activities study. Okay, can the next, yeah. Okay, about observation object. Okay, in here, in about observation object, there are place, actor, and activity. It is based on the Spratley. Place, it is where the interaction in social situation is being. And then for actor is a people who are playing a role. And then the activity is characters in ongoing social situation. For example, when we want to analyze in the education, the place is school, and the actor is student, teacher, headmaster, and then and all of the people that in the school. And the fourth activity is a teacher when doing teach the student. It is the activity that happen in observation object. Okay, for the next slide, please. This is the observation states. There are 3 observation states. First is descriptive observation, focus observation, and then selected observation. In descriptive observation, carried by the researchers where the researcher entering certain social situation as a research object. And then in this stage, researchers has not brought the problem to be studied. So the researchers conduct a general and throughout exploration, describing everything that it's seen, heard, and felt. And all data are recorded. So the result of the observation conclude in an organized stage. And then for focus observation, the researcher has conduct mini tour of observation. It is just mini tour, which is observation that has been narrowed down to focus on certain aspect. This observation also called focus observation because in this stage, the researchers conduct taxonomy analysis so it can be found to the focus. And then for the selective observation, the researcher has described the focus font so that the data more detailed in this step. Conducting a componential analysis at the focus, the stage has found the researcher has found the characteristic, contrast or differences and similarities between other categories. And also the stage, researchers expected to have been able to find a deep understanding or hypothesis. Based on the Spratley, the selected observation still called mini tour observation. And then next, this is the advantage and disadvantage of observation. The first is advantage, elimination of subjective bias, because this is the observation. So we are trying observation and we can eliminate the subjective bias then in interview. And then the instance of the information and less depending or active cooperation on the part of informants. For the disadvantage of observation, this is a limitation of the provided information, changing in behavior, missing some interaction as engaged in recording, and also different interpreting from different observed, because different persons so have different interpretation. Okay, for the next. This is the example of observation that do in some research. This is from Journal of Language Identity and Education. Here we know that same language, different history, developing critical English teacher identity. This is using observation. Here we know that this is using observation in methodology, ethnographic. Okay. This is participant observation and also unstructured interview. So as the Mbak Elo said that in qualitative data, when we want to collection the data, we cannot only just focus in one data collection. So in here, the researcher tried to combine between participant observation and unstructured interview. Okay, the next. This is the second example. Verbal and non-verbal language pre-service teacher relationship in TYEL. This is two different. This is research, conducted observation, and also interview. In this research, the researcher also tried to combine two ways to collecting the data. This first is conducting classroom observation, as long as the pre-service teachers carry out, and then try to observation using interview. Okay, next example. This is the analyzing Indonesian online newspaper. Here, the researcher focus on newspaper headline using lexical functional grammar. In this method, use observation method with note-taking technique. This is the headline that try to analyze. Okay, next. Okay, next, data collection techniques using document. Next, there are some documents type. The first documents writing, document in the form of image, and then also document in the form of works or art. In documents in writing, for example, life history, biography, and then in the form of an image, there are, for example, picture, and then the last document in the form of work of art, for example, film, and then picture that like picture that's what's that picture that from the art. Okay, next. In documentation, complementary to the use of observation and interview methods in qualitative research. But in here, not all documents have high degree of credibility. This is the example. Many photos don't reflect the original condition. Yeah. For example, we want to analyze with using picture. So we should know about that picture is the real picture or not. Because sometimes picture or photos made for certain purpose. Okay, next. This is the example of the document research. In here, has English been increasingly? Okay, next. In here, in the methodology, this is mentioned. This is try to document about the exam. Okay, next. This is the coding terms apply for paragraph and character conversation. This is the document using Coda. Okay, next. This is beyond traditional literacy. In here, the researcher find the best interaction to fostering student in digital literacy learning. In here, data collection included classroom observation and student digital artifact. This is one of the kinds of the documentation about artifact. Okay, next. And then next, information novel. In here, novel murder on the Orient Express. This research use descriptive qualitative method to analyze, and then this is using document as a novel. Okay, next. Okay, next about triangulation will be explained by Mbak Rilin. Time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Budian. Well, now let's talk about triangulation. Okay, triangulation refers to the use of multiple methods or data source in qualitative research to develop a comprehensive understanding of phenomena. This is according to pattern 1990. This is means this method using more than one method in collecting the data. Okay, here triangulation. I take some important. First of all, is combine first data collection technique and data sources that already exist. The researcher actually collect data and at the same time test the credibility of the data with various data collection technique and data source. And the last is this method using different data collection technique to obtain data from the same source. Okay. Here, according to Norman, triangulation has 4 types. There are triangulation method, researcher triangulation, data source triangulation, and the last is triangulation theory. Well, I will explain first method of triangulation method. Here, triangulation method, researcher use multiple methods such as data from interview, observation, documentation, and others. The researcher here can combine the data from the result of interview, observation, and also combine it with the result of the data documentation if the result of this method is the same. So we can tell the data is valid because the researcher here use not only one source, but the researcher also can combine the 3 methods of the collecting the data. And the second is researcher triangulation. Researcher triangulation, we can tell it as investigator or multiple researcher triangulation. This method can be done by one or more researcher or investigator or participant. By using this method, the information about the data is more clear. Researchers should be objective and have more knowledge and experience about the researcher in order to result expected can be achieved. And the third type here, data source triangulation. Data source triangulation is the method used to further explore the data from many sources, such as maybe I give example, time, place, and also person. The researcher can use those ways at the time, so that the researcher, the data perspective can be wider. And the last is triangulation theory. This last type is combining or comparing the data with the other relevant theories. The purpose here, the researcher minimize bias from researcher. And now let's look for the example article from Rifai Baron about learning English ethnograph studies at Seman 81 Jakarta. Here, wait a minute. Here, this article using triangulation method, using interview, observation, and also document analysis. We can see from the abstract here. The data were collected through observation, interview, and document analysis. And the next article is from Wati Kurniawati, Language Vitality of Sundanese of Cianjur City. Here, the researcher also use use triangulation method, because here she use more than one method. Here, interview, collecting data, taking note, and etc. And then from Priscilla Agna Ekawati, analysis grammatical interference in the oral communication presented by PP participant. Here, the researcher using triangulation more here, using the multiple source of information. We can see here. So most of the researcher here using triangulation method, because they use more than one method in collecting the data. Okay, maybe enough for me. Thank you. I give back to Mbak Elo. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for all the presenters. Well, all the data collection technique in qualitative research have been presented. So thank you for watching our video, and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you.